weekly live stream show covering topics of interest in transportation presented by the CITT. Now, that stands for the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, the organization overseeing the use of the half-penny sales surtax in Miami-Dade County. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube as we stream directly from the Community News Network on the social media platforms of Miami's community newspapers. I'm Cheryl Mizell, CITT Ambassador Program Coordinator, and today for your regular host, Javier Betancourt, who is our Director at the CITT. Now, if you recognize my name or voice, it may be familiar to you from my time in radio, but you can find me right here now on Mobility Matters, alternating as host and keeping you informed about the volunteer CITT ambassadors who ride transit quite frequently and use a mobile app, Velocia, to give us feedback about their experiences in exchange for rewards, all to help us improve transit services in the county. Now, if completing transit surveys and receiving rewards sounds interesting to you, then you'll want to stay tuned because we'll be sharing more about that shortly. But right now, I'd like to briefly introduce you to our featured guest for today's Mobility Matters. He's the Manager of Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, DBE program, and Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, at the Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works. Please meet Nathaniel Surrancy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. Nathaniel, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started with the interview, I want to invite you, the viewer, to visit our webpage to learn more about the CITT, to apply to become a trust member of the CITT, or to become a CITT ambassador. And the website that you would need to visit is miamidade.gov/CITT. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're a transit rider who likes to complete surveys and receive rewards, then you just might want to take a picture of that QR code that's on the screen and go directly to the webpage and apply. And if you get started, at the beginning of the show, you could be finished before we're done, have that application in. How about that? Also, I'd like to ask you to reach out to family, friends, colleagues, to tell them to come and join you right now to watch this broadcast, because today, in my interview with Nathaniel Surrancy, you're going to learn some things that might be of interest to them. We're going to learn a little bit about him and his background and how the Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works is working to make transit services more accessible to transit riders, and how they ensure equal opportunities for all business owners interested in working with the Department of Transportation. Okay, Nathaniel, I think I've given them enough time to go and find all the friends in the building, call, their family and get them to watch. So let's get started by you telling us a little bit about your background.
Well, a little bit about Nate Surrancy. I like to be called Nate when I'm in trusted
Okay,
company
Nate.
of good people. I've been with the county now going on 24 and a half years. I started out working with Commissioner Moss of District 9 back in 1998. And from there, I served with Commissioner Moss as his district director of constituent services, and then was immediately promoted within a year's time, or 2 years, or less than a year, 2 years, less than 2 years' time, to become his district, his director of legislation in his downtown office. And I served a good number of years in that capacity, working with him and establishing, our legislative priorities for the district as well as for the county overall. But one of the unique things about serving with him at that time and period of his career as county commissioner was that we had the opportunity to be one of the first chairpersons of the Transportation Committee. Awesome. Established under the Board of County Commissioners to give more of a transit priority, if you will, priority to transit to go ahead and start looking at where can we make improvements and do the things that transit needs to do in order to serve the people of Miami-Dade County. And so with that, in working closely with transit director at that point, Roosevelt Bradley, and then doing a number of special projects, if you will, with the commissioner and with the Board of County Commissioners and the Transportation Committee, we had an opportunity to learn a lot about transit. And so coming from a transit-oriented family, being that my mom, God bless her, who worked in the school board system as a lead supervisor and trainer for school bus operators, I was always around bus since a little kid. And so the last name Surrancy, when it goes through the county and it hits certain transportation depots, back then, particularly 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, 24 years ago, when people heard the last name Surrancy, the immediate response was, "Is such and such your mom?" And so I was always connected to, first the school bus and then in transit, beginning my career after I left Commissioner Moss and decided to make career moves at an early age. I went on ahead and was promoted over into transit as an SPA2, Special Projects Administrator 2, and then began to work in operations with staff over there and learned a lot from the root of the program of bus up through the ranks, and then now becoming a DBE manager and ADA manager for the two most critical components of our agency from a federal perspective. So that's where I am now.
Wow, that's quite a career. And you've have 24?
24 years.
I saw you vacillating between the 24 and 25.
Yeah, because once you hit 24, you start moving, thinking already 25. So you're thinking ahead already, saying you just claim it right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm excited to be where I am.
Yeah, and to have worked with Commissioner Moss, he's a great guy.
Yes.
A great guy.
Yeah.
And I was happy to see that they renamed the cultural center in his honor.
Yes.
What a great honor
What an
that
honor.
was. Yes, indeed.
Well deserved.
Well deserved.
One of those other pet projects that we worked on together.
And in fact, you mentioned Roosevelt Bradley. I can remember Roosevelt coming around from my days in radio and talking about the People's Transportation Plan. So
the big sale.
Yeah, and so and then coming to work for the CITT, I found that so interesting that I would have an opportunity after, conducting so many interviews with Roosevelt, during that time to try to help people to better understand whether or not they were going to vote on the issue or not. So it's very interesting to come around. So. As a lead compliance officer, Nathaniel, we know that you have a very difficult task in ensuring that the department remains compliant with federal and state regulations, both for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program as well as ADA. So, but let's talk about the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. Okay. Let's start there. Tell us a little bit about that, how it works, and how people can participate.
Well, let me dovetail into that. Miami-Dade County's transit department is the 15th largest transportation agency in the country. We're a part of the Big 50, as they call it. And with that, the agency is made up of the 4 commuter modes that we like to consider to be commuter modes. That is Metro Bus, which is fixed route transportation, traditional service. And then you also have Metro Rail. Then you have Metro Mover that circulates around downtown. And then outside of that, or as a complement to that traditional service where buses cannot go and serve persons of disabilities, we also have what is called the STS, or Special Transportation services that are provided and vetted through our office as well. So we have those 4 modes available. With those 4 modes, it takes not just local funding to happen, but it also requires some federal funding to happen and be mixed into that overall account of those services being provided. I don't think one transit agency in this country is able to operate a service without without federal funding.
Sure.
So with that, we try to seek out as much as possible federal funding, not only to help build projects, but to also add service where federal funding can support us. And so with that, we do that through what is called the DBE program, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. That is a program and a unique opportunity for small businesses who cannot compete as prime contractors on a major contract, that they can, by federal requirement through our office and our vetting, participate in lettings that literally allow them the opportunity to come in as a subcontractor on a contract to a major prime. That major prime is then responsible for not only being a mentor to those individual firms on a project, but they also rely on them. And I always say this, that DBEs in particular on any county project are just as significant to the project as the prime. Because where the prime is not able to perform certain work or doesn't have the resources within, that particular subcontractor as a DBE is able to come with those special skill sets and allows them to be able to fill in the gaps on any construction project, or for that matter, any professional contract that is overseeing a project for project management purposes. Or a DBE can be one that provides goods and services to the county for things that we are looking for in the areas of goods and services. So DBEs are very critical, and those DBEs are just not everybody can be a DBE, but there are special classifications and statuses that you have to hold according to SBA standards, Small Business Administration standards. And so with that, we go through the process, and we recommend everybody to go through the certification process that can and will and want to be a DBE, a certified DBE who is ready, willing, and able according to the federal guidelines of 49 Part CFR Part 26.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty serious about making sure you're ready to jump in at any point in time. You can't just say we're getting it together. No. You have to, when they put them in those programs, they have to be able to move.
I've always heard this set of wisdom from a leader of mine that I hold dear to my heart. She's always said to me, when the moment to come has arrived, the time to prepare is already past. So in other words,
that's a good one. That is a tweetable quote.
When the time to do has come, the time to prepare is already past. So what DBEs have to always remain committed to is being ready. Being ready, not only just being hungry, because everybody wants to be hungry, and everybody is hungry because they're looking for their next bid. But the key here is to be ready, to be able to now put boots on the ground and be able to now apply what you are ready to do to get done. And so it's with that DBEs in their classification and certification status have to be ready, willing, and able to perform the tasks that they are subcontracted to do.
So tell me some of the things that you do to prepare, to help people prepare so they don't feel so like
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we do is that we work hand in hand with the department or the division within ISD, the Internal Services Department, known as the Small Business Development Group division. And so with that, we assist them and direct everyone who wants to become a DBE, a certified DBE. We walk them over and send them and refer them over to the SBD division. With that, they go through the certification process because our office does not do certifications, but the certifying agency is Small Business Development. And with that, once they complete their certification, then we go through processes of announcing, the inside track of a project that is up and coming. And we provide them all the necessary ins and outs of what the project is requiring and does require. And with that, we make sure and allow that those individuals that are showing up to these pre-bid meetings come ready to do the job at the moment the bid is awarded. So there are processes and layers through the whole contracting out and bidding process. And we walk them through that process, making sure that, number one, not only is their certification up to date, but also making sure that they have the proper workforces ready to go at the time that the notice to proceed is issued. So we go through a number of steps with the DBEs, one-on-one and both group-wise, because not one contract would have one single DBE on there that is not ready to perform, but we also have multiple DBEs on that contract, because what we do is that we set goals in place for those overall contracts. And those DBE goals play a part. That says, for instance, with our busway, that there's a 24% DBE goal tied to the South Corridor project. And with that South Corridor project, that prime contractor has a responsibility of making sure that 24% of that contract is performed by a DBE, certified DBE on the job, and then in turn also paid and commensurate with that percentage that is allotted on that project, that the payments made on that contract to DBEs equal that amount of the 24%.
So it's being tracked.
So it is being tracked, and compliance is a very big arm of our responsibility as DBE managers and compliance officers on those federalized contracts. Because the feds want to know, how much did you apply to, not only how much did you apply, but how much did you spend in the course of the project. So we are accountable to them.
Clearly.
Yes.
Clearly. Are there any new developments coming soon with this program?
As far as the program is always under modification and always being updated as we go. The interesting thing that we are learning, and we're waiting on more of it to come out, is that number one, we saw where FTA started to include into the DBE program consideration for SBEs. Those are small business enterprises who can be factored into in addition to the DBE goal for a project. Those are other small business enterprises that can literally be factored into our overall evaluation of a contract. So with that, moving forward, the new development is that we're going to also consider not only SBEs being factored into our overall DBE component, but we're also going to be looking at how do we get more women business enterprises involved in our DBE planning and tracking and awarding, because the industry as it is today and as it was in the past always has some level of discrimination against women-owned businesses. So FTA saw a way to get around that and say, look, we'll just make it a part of the overall DBE program and say, this is what you have to consider when developing your DBE goals and plans for projects that are upcoming that we, FTA, provide funding to and for. So in the new year, as new projects come aboard, we're going to be looking at those other two tiers to figure out how can we factor in more SBEs and more women-owned businesses into the contract letting.
Sounds great. Now, the place where they apply for this, it's on your website, correct?
You can go to our website, but what we will do is direct you in terms of your certification.
Sure.
We will always direct you over to ISD, to the Small Business Development Division.
So they should start there? Is it better for them to start there?
It's best to start there, because when you come to our office, you have to come ready.
I understand.
You have to come ready with all certifications in place, knowing that, whatever team you're going to be a part of, that you've been vetted by that potential prime. And then that prime has a level of comfort to involve you in that particular letting and structure of his subcontractor team and subconsultant team.
And for our listeners, ISD is the
Internal Services Department.
And they can find them on our webpage. On
our website, yes.
And they would just search for Internal Services Department.
Correct.
And then under that, the disadvantaged business.
Well, under that, there would be the Small Business Development Division. And then from that division, within that division, you'll also have the processes as to how to become a certifying agency. And for Miami-Dade County, that is one of the many certifying agencies that is available to go ahead and get your certification with the state of Florida in the Unified Certification Program, so that you can be recognized as a DBE to do business in the state of Florida.
Excellent. Listen, if you just started watching, this is Mobility Matters, presented by the CITT, Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, and we are broadcasting on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, streaming directly from the Community News Network on Miami Community Newspaper social media platforms. You can follow us on social media at GoCITT. also Transportation Trust, as well as CITT ambassadors. And by the way, those CITT ambassadors get points, which they can redeem rewards for promoting CITT messaging in their social media. So there's another way, and they participate in focus groups. So if any of this sounds interesting, remember to check out that QR code that's on the screen. And please remember to like or follow us when you visit our pages. I'm Cheryl Mizell, your host and the CITT Ambassador Program Coordinator. My guest is Nathaniel Surrancy, and we're discussing the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, as well as the ADA at the Department of Transportation and Public Works. So, Nathaniel, let's talk a little bit about ADA and
Sure.
what that means, to people in terms of, what some of the services that are accessible to people with disabilities in transportation.
Good deal. Well, ADA for the department is a very critical piece. One of the things that that I've learned in my capacity as DBE manager and ADA manager, particularly in ADA, is that our transportation system has to be accessible. That's a very big word, very critical word, and it should be a troubling word for a lot of people who work in the transportation industry. The reason why I say it like that is because anywhere we deny an opportunity for a person with disabilities to board our system or enter into our facilities, that is a trip denial. And we are not in the business to deny people a trip anywhere, because the key is to allow everybody to be mobile, to have mobility and access to mobility outlets, if you will, within the transit system to get from point A to point B. For us, that's a very critical piece because we don't want to leave anybody behind as an agency. And our director, Director Euless Cleckley, and CEO, he has made it his priority, and definitely we echo the very message of his vision of being a mobile community. Because we want to see people not only get out of their cars, but we also want to see people with disabilities who are limited to a wheelchair-bound persons, to have full access to a bus stop wherever possible, wherever the routes are serving. We also want to make sure that those bus stops with shelters are accessible, meaning that persons with wheelchairs can feel safe, in inclement conditions to be sheltered from the elements. We also want to make sure that those stops and places where we serve in transportation, particularly on bus, those persons are able to board with no problem. Just basically have a seamless boarding onto a vehicle, a vessel known as a bus, and then be able to be strapped down within that vehicle safely and be transported to wherever they want to go in terms of the next stop location. So with that, ADA is very critical, and it works the same way for our Metro Rail facilities and any of our facilities that we have personnel that is working. We want to make sure that our environments are safe and reliable for everybody to have safe passage into and through and out of with no problem. And so with that ADA being a civil rights matter, we want to make sure that everybody has the right to ride. And even if they can't access a bus stop within walking distance, we do have an alternate service, a backup service, or a complementary service, if you will, that literally speaks to everything about a bus. It gets you more directly to your point and destination, and that is our special transportation services.
STS.
Yes, STS. Everybody knows it as STS, but it's Special Transportation Services. And that service is over 4,000 rides per day. From what I'm learning.
That's a lot.
And that's a lot. And so with that, is it a huge task to perform? Yes. Can we expand it to be better? Yes. We have a wonderful contractor in place, but we just have opportunity always to make it better and much more accessible for individuals who are limited in their ability to go out and get on a bus, or get out and go ride a train, or get out and go circulate around downtown on a Metro Mover. So we need to make sure, and we will always ensure that regardless of what the issue of the day is is that we resolve our issues internally so that the public service that we alter is not interrupted for long term.
You know, and on a lot of times when we think about these services, they require a lot of hands-on, detailed kind of
Yes.
thought processes. I mean, because you think about even when we have storms, I mean, they require special needs for being evacuated.
Evacuate.
You know, so and that's a huge undertaking.
Yes.
Huge undertaking.
And that's something that we experience every year with potential storms that are coming to South Florida. We hit those areas with buses, and those buses have a certain window before we actually pull them off the street. So with that, there is a process in place through emergency management that we participate and are responsible for executing that service. And so kudos to all the bus operators and supervisors and superintendents who make sure that process happens, because without operations, many people would remain stranded in low-lying areas and flooded areas. God only knows what would happen if we didn't, do what we do as an agency.
It's so important.
So everybody in operations, if you're hearing this, you are hearing it from one of your colleagues. Good job, keep it up. So.
Yes, and the other thing I thought about was, that you're also involved with in terms of service animals and making policy around that.
Yes, service animals are a big discussion always, and some people have come up with their own personal legislated service animals, which are not acceptable on a system like ours.
Okay.
So service animals are pretty much as a priority are limited to service dogs. There are just some other animals that are permissible, but I won't disclose exactly what those are. I want to keep that can of worms tightly closed, and we'll address them situation by situation. But through our office, we have over the years, and will continue to do so, is to train our operators to know how to identify and how to approach those unique situations of service animals. Not every animal is the same, and if a service animal acts out of conduct, we do have the right as an agency and as a bus operator to have a person to disembark from the bus vessel. If the animal becomes a little rowdy or just overly engaged, if you will, with the public, and if it causes some uneasy or people to be uncomfortable, those are moments where we call in the right authorities to go ahead and address that issue in person.
And then also I read something about sidewalks also come into play in terms of making things easy for people with disabilities to move around, from street to street.
Yes. Sidewalks are a major issue in Miami-Dade County. It's always a priority for us. Through our transitional plan with our public works division or side of the house, we have a responsibility of countless miles, if you will, to make sure that we maintain sidewalks as best as possible, curb cuts and everything associated with that. Through that, we address some of those issues through our LAP program. Our LAP program is our local agency program system or process that addresses anything closely related to a school zone. And those sidewalks and walkways and access roads are addressed and updated as much as possible. So wherever we see the need as a priority, that's where the LAP program goes and begins to address that. Our transitional plan, as it relates to sidewalks, curb cuts, and the like, keeps us responsible to the state level to make sure that any state funding that is applied to those particular areas or school projects that are intersected with Miami-Dade County's roads and sidewalks, that funding goes in to help upgrade those areas around the school system, school buildings, if you will, or school properties, to make sure that children, along with their elderly grandparents, like my mom used to do with my son, walk and go pick them up. You want to make sure that those sidewalks are level. You don't want any trip hazards.
Exactly.
And so those are things that we go out and assess and look at and make sure that if we do see a need, particularly for a person that is wheelchair bound, and it poses a problem, that we address those things immediately within a certain time frame. And so with that, we do have a set of expectations and standards that we operate from as it relates to our sidewalks.
Well, Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming in and sharing such important and valuable information for our viewers today. We really appreciate you coming in and doing it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Thank you to our director for allowing me to have this moment with you, to be a second voice to the system.
Thank you, Director Cleckley. We appreciate that. He's been here as well.
Yes.
So absolutely. Well, I'd like to say thank you to our viewers also for joining us today. If you missed part of the show, don't worry. You can watch it from the beginning. Just check back, and you can find the links to the full video. And again, special thanks to our guest, Nathaniel Surrancy, who is the manager of Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act at the Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works. And a special thanks to our producer over there. You can't see him. He's behind the scenes, Alex Sukas, the producer here at Miami's Community Newspapers, as well as our other in-house producer, Carla Damien, who, yay, Carla. And I'm Cheryl Mizell, your host and CITT program coordinator. Please join us again in 2 weeks when Javier Betancourt will return as your host of Mobility Matters. Until then, keep moving forward.